Hi, my name is Rachel and today I'm going to talk about The Crescent Stone by Matt Michaelatos. So I had previously done a video called Why is the Christian Publishing Industry Like This? And I had talked about Wander / Tyndale. Wander is an imprint publisher of Tyndale Publishing, which honestly I did not realize how far back into my ex-Fundy history Tyndale has been a part of my life. Apparently Bill Myers, is that his name? Published his books under Tyndale, which is like my life as a smashed burrito. And I read like that whole series in 3rd grade with my Fundy school. So yeah, apparently Tyndale has been a part of my life for a long time. Anyway, Tyndale has an imprint of Wander and I had talked about their books. So they publish evangelical Christian stuff aimed at teens is what Wander does. And I have read quite a bit of their stuff actually. Maybe all of it except their epic Bible, which that's not happening. I don't need to read about a buff white Jesus. I've read enough buff white Jesus in my time as a white former evangelical. Anyway, so I did that video. It's linked down below. And at the end of it, I was like, there is hope because there is one author who Tyndale has published, Don't Tell Them, who is actually a Christian who I think represents what Jesus Christ as depicted in the Bible is like. And he's a really nice guy. I think he follows me on Twitter now. He actually watched that video. Matt, if you're watching this video is not for you because I am going to be talking about reviews of your book. So the thing about the reviews of this book is that this book, because it is a Christian book, a lot of Christians had it marketed to them, which means that they picked it up. They didn't like it. They didn't like it. And we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about, you know, the book and what I liked about it and stuff. And we're going to talk about the reviews. Okay, so here's the pitch for the book. It's a girl with a deadly lung disease, a boy with a tragic past, a land where the sun never sets but darkness creeps in. So Madeline Oliver is one of our two main characters. The other is Jason Wu. Madeline has, what is it called? The branch of lung diseases that cystic fibrosis is a part of. Interstitiary lung disease, I think. So Madeline Oliver, one main character, has that. Jason Wu, her friend, and the other main character is a... He's an odd kid that he promised to never lie after he told a lie and it caused family tragedy. So he always tells the truth no matter the price. Madeline is about to die. Her cystic fibrosis, I don't know if it's actually cystic fibrosis. It's said that she has an interstitiary lung disease, but I don't know if it's CF or not. She's in the hospital. She's probably not going to make it. And a guy named Hanali shows up and talks to her and Jason and is like, hey, you can have your ability to breathe back if you come to the Sunlit Lands for a year where I live and you agree to fight these skim, which are our enemies, for us for a year, 1 human year, then you can have your ability to breathe back. So then Madeline and Jason are swept up into this fantasy land and they're finding out about politics and the different cultures and, you know, what's going on in this place that they have agreed to have be in service to for 1 human year. The book is fine. It's fine. I think that people who liked Narnia will like this. People who don't like this are typically Christians, and I'll explain why. So Jason Wu, our main character, is he is Chinese, and he, not long into the beginning of the book, explains to Madeline about the Chinese Exclusion Act. And this is sort of a theme where Jason explains how this is not taught in history, and history is a little bit whitewashed. Later in the book, there are several characters of color. Their portrayal may not be super great. I think that one of them being a Pacific Islander and saying brah all the time was kind of odd to me. So I think that could have used maybe a sensitivity reader, as well as the cystic fibrosis could have used a sensitivity reader, but more so the Pacific Islander character. So so many thoughts, not sure how to condense. So this is a theme where Jason talks about the Chinese Exclusion Act and the whitewashing of history of that. I certainly never learned that in school, and I went to Christian school from the ages of 5 to the age of 13, and I also never learned it in public school in my 4 years of public high school. That's brought up, as well as Native American residential schools and the forced assimilation and the abuse that occurred there is also talked about. And this is talked about in the context of a Native American character says this to Jason, and Jason's like, that didn't happen. I've never heard of that. I think you're making that up. Because there's like an ongoing, you know, thing where they're joking, like they're trying to get Jason to believe things that aren't true, and Jason's like, that's not a true thing, and the character was like, ouch man, that's a real thing, this is a real thing that happened to my family. And I thought that that whole conversation was pretty beautifully done, and I thought that it was a good way to continue on the theme of the whitewashing of history by the, you know, winners of wars, right? And the Native American character says to him, you know, don't just say like you know, you should listen first before you say things. And Jason was like, I will, I'll listen from now on. I didn't realize that the residential schools were a thing, and I apologize. The character tells Jason, like, you know, scars are really helpful for us to remember what happened to us. And his grandfather, who was in the residential schools, he's talking about how he appreciates his grandpa's scars because they remind him of what his people had been through. And so he tells Jason, you should ask yourself why the LNL, who they serve, don't have any scars. So now I want to bring up, adding on to this, bring up a review. This person says, the Crescent Stone is more social commentary than traditional fantasy. There is no great evil to be fought, just social inequity and greed to be recognized. First of all, social inequity is a great evil. Greed is a great evil, but whatever. Human children are offered a deal, blah, blah, blah. These children come from all backgrounds, and we get brief descriptions of past racial discrimination in America out of context, so it sounds even more shocking and baffling. This person missed the point. So first of all, it's not out of context because it's a general theme throughout the book. The author was trying to make a comment on how the people in power whitewash history to make themselves look like they're not the aggressors. So that's why Jason was so adamant that Madeline knew about the Chinese Exclusion Act. That's why it was so hurtful to Jason's friend that he did not know about the native residential schools. And then it's why when we find more out about the Skim, we're surprised that, oh, they're not actually bad after all. These are people that are being taken advantage of and treated like garbage. And the LNL are changing the narrative so that it sounds like they're just trying to protect themselves, when in reality, they're the aggressors. But if you can't pick up on themes in literature, I guess that's fine. Later in the book, this is filled with spoilers, by the way, so if you're not here for spoilers, I'm sorry. Later in the book, Madeline's boyfriend, Darius, shows up, and it turns out that he's actually been because of the odd way that time works, in the Sunlit Lands, he's been there for longer than Madeline, even though he got there after her in the mortal, you know, human world. He has been working for the Skim, which are the enemies of the LNL, who Madeline's been serving this whole time. And this person says, we are given a several-page explanation of how the arrangement between the Skim and the LNL is just like the American prison system. Wait, what's that you say? Why are we being spoon-fed a heavy-handed explanation of the whole metaphor in a fantasy novel? Excellent question. Yeah, it was a little heavy-handed, but I think also it does make sense because these are teenagers and they are from our world. So they're being... the teenager is explaining something so that Madeline will understand something that has like a tie back to the world that they actually come from, to help her understand. So it did make sense to me, but it also, yeah, it was a little heavy-handed. I could see that. The person said that ruined the whole book for them. That's funny to me. This person says that there's decent storytelling in this book, but it's overshadowed by uneven writing filled with preachy messages. I can see that, yeah, the writing could use a little bit of polishing. I think that Matt Michelatos typically writes nonfiction, which is great, and I do plan to read his nonfiction. The one that stuck out to me the most was Jason's info dump on immigration on Angel Island. I'm not trying to diminish what happened to the immigrants there, but when you're in the middle of a fantasy plot and you start giving me a history lesson on something completely unrelated, well, I'm gonna have a problem with that. Again, I think that the point was missed, that this book was also about how power is exercised through the whitewashing of history, and because when you are able to change historical narratives, you can have a lot of power over people. We're seeing that play out right now with this whole critical race theory debate, where people are upset because they think that their children are learning critical race theory in school, which is not a thing. And then it says the diversity feels a lot like tokenism. I could see that. This says, the more the book dragged on, though, the more contrived the whole story became, and then the more I started to hate the writing. I've never had an author try to smack me over the head with patronizing moralistic speeches so many times in one book. I'm all for diversity and representation, reflecting societal issues in fiction to hopefully show a future generation a better path to take, but there is a way to do that all while still telling a compelling story that is uniquely its own.
Tell me you're racist without telling me you're racist.
I can both agree and disagree with this. So the problem is that the book did drag a little bit, and like I said, it could have used a little bit more polishing. Like, Matt did a really good job of using excerpts from his own books within books, right? I think that a way to have that conversation about the whitewashing of history would have been to include excerpts from books that whitewashed history. Unfortunately, that wasn't what we had, and instead we did have a lot of characters doing, you know, speeches about how certain things were rewritten in history. So while I think that the message is good and it's a necessary thing and it's a great theme to have a conversation about within a work of fiction, definitely a necessary conversation, I do think that the way he went about it was a little clunky. But I don't think that that's really the issue that these people are having. The issue that these people are having is that they don't want to talk about those issues. They're like, oh, it's annoying that somebody brought this to my attention. I hate learning. Wah. I'm all for diversity and representation. Red flag. This person's Goodreads account is called The Jesus Fandom. DNF. The whole racism talk was nice and all, but all the characters just felt like they were token non-whites. Lots of stories of racism against non-whites, but not a mention of the massacres in South Africa of white people made it feel very one-sided to me. Authors always act like talking about racism is such a brave, never before done thing. It's not. First of all, I mean, you said it right there. Like, the author specifically talked about things that happened within the context of the United States where our two main characters came from. The Chinese Exclusion Act, the residential schools against Native American, Ellis Island. So it was all in context of the United States. It seems like this person was just trying to find a way to talk about, oh, whites are discriminated against too. The Irish were treated badly. Just, oh my god. And this is the thing, is that like anytime a Christian is like, oh, I hate talking about racism, it's so annoying. It's like, you might want to switch religions. I think that Christian fiction in general is typically not very great. Like, I've never read a Christian book and been like, this is 5 stars, and it's not because there's anything in like secular society that I just feel like works better in fiction. It's not like about sex or anything. It's just that I think the publishers and the people that work in, you know, the publishing for Christian books, they just don't really try to make like the best product that they can. They just want to have a product to have on the market to be comparable to a secular product, because they know that fundy parents will buy it. So I think that that's, you know, part of the issue of why I didn't give this 5 stars, is that, you know, I think that it could have used a little bit more polishing, and I think that in a had it been done by a different publisher, we might have had, you know, a different book with, you know, different people working on it. And yeah, it's a little I don't know, but that's not to say that all, you know, secular books are great. I mean, Caraval certainly exists. And the thing about this is that it's not bad. It's a good book. It's fine. I would certainly give it to my nieces, and their, you know, parents are fundy. My brother is pretty fundy. My sister-in-law a little less so. I would give it to my nieces, and I would think that they would have, you know, they would be okay with it. It's not like overtly it doesn't like really, it's not like Jesus saves the day, so I don't, it's a little less fundy than other books, but it's still probably at the Christian bookstore down the street from my house, right? So I think that this is a good, what I'm trying to say is I'm glad that this book exists, right? I'm glad that this book exists because I think that it's necessary, especially having grown up how I grew up in these fundy schools. We didn't talk about things like this. We did not learn anything about structural ways in which racism persists persists. We didn't talk about hardly anything. We talked about the Bible. So the fact that this, and when I say talked about the Bible, I mean literally, like we had Bible class instead of science class sometimes. We had a how to debunk evolution class in which the Bible was like the main text. The thing about this is that this book is necessary. I'm glad that this book exists because there are kids out there who are not going to have access to other books like, you know, I am, like my kids are living in a, you know, secular home. They're not going to have access, but they will have access to this, and this might be a way in which they have conversations about things like war and the rewriting of history and the Native American residential schools and Chinese Exclusion Act and things that happened at Ellis Island that otherwise they would not have had, that otherwise they would never have had access to. So I'm really glad that this book exists. It is necessary because certainly there is a attempt to erase actual history, especially within white fundamentalist Christian circles. So I'm glad that this book is probably at the Christian bookstore or in the Christian section, in Christian fiction at, you know, Barnes and Noble. It's certainly available on Tyndale and Wander's, you know, websites, so that those kids do have a way to actually learn history. And I think that not learning history is, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I think that it is in so many ways a violation of kids' rights. I think that what is happening now with this critical race theory, which it's not that, I think that that is violating kids' rights to learn to learn actual history, and also it's furthering your divide between the people whose lives are still affected by those things that happen, because systemically those things still have effects today. So I think that books like this are necessary, and I'm glad it exists. Is the writing a little clunky? Sure. Does it need a little polishing? Yes, but that could be said for a lot of books. It's not the worst book I read in the last 6 months, and I'm glad to say that I gave it 3.5 stars, which is more than I can say for Caraval. Again, I will take any opportunity to shit on that book. That's basically all I have to say. This is a good book if you're looking for like Christian fantasy, if you liked, you know, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but like you want something a little more relevant to today and current, then this might be something to pick up. If you're looking for something to read with your kids and you're, you know, like a Christian but not a fundamentalist, this is a great idea. If you have a Christian family who you want to buy a book for, this is a great idea. Also, if you have a Christian school that you're like involved in or you want to donate books to, this might be a good pick. Actually, the availability of books in in my Christian school library was huge. So I did go to one Lutheran school that was a little more lax, and they had Harry Potter, and that's the first place that I was introduced to the idea that Harry Potter was okay. I know that I don't like, you know, talk about it now on my channel because J.K. Rowling is a huge TERF, but that was sort of a gateway book for me into reading about things that were not like with overt Christian themes that were trying to proselytize and make me more fundy. So I appreciate, you know, that it was there, that it was available. But in my other schools, like there was nothing, and they definitely did not have Harry Potter. They were very anti Harry Potter in all the Baptist schools I went to. So this might be a book that you could donate to one of those Christian schools and have it be a great book, like a book to help kids who are trying to, you know, expand their horizons. Also highly recommend going and following Matt McClellan on Twitter. He's a really nice guy. This author is just a really nice guy, and like actually represents, there's a few people who I think actually represent Christ. My friend Allie is a Christian, and I think that she's everything that I would hope that a Christian would actually be, and Matt is also like that. So even though I don't believe in that religion anymore, I still think that, you know, I know a lot about Jesus and I know who he was and as depicted in the Bible, and I think that there are people who represent that out there who still, you know, consider themselves Christians, and Matt's one of them. So if you're looking for that a little bit of hope in your life, maybe go follow him on Twitter. And I'm not talking about the buff white Jesus that Tyndale tries to represent as Jesus. I will never get over the buff white Jesus. Why? Why do they do that? Anyway, if you're looking for Christian fiction, this might be the book for you. So thanks for watching. Oh, a little note about the CF. So while the book does start out with the whole idea of a magical cure for her cystic fibrosis or whatever interstitiary lung disease Madeline had, in the end she realizes that the magic that the Ellendale have comes at the price of stealing the health or whatever or they're, you know, in need of from a skim. So Madeline finds out that her, you know, her good health, her ability to breathe now did not come from nowhere. She took it away from a skim, one of the enemies of the Eleanor. So in the end, she does choose to go back home knowing that she is going to be dealing with her lung disease again. So I appreciate that it was not a magical cure situation, because I know those can be like really problematic, just not good representation. So that I appreciated. So if you were worried about that as I was going into this and as I was at the beginning of the book, just know that that is how it ends. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.